While y'all debating on who we are, the original owners of the planet are, think about this. And this coming out of Supreme Wisdom Lessons. Question number 6. Why does the Caucasian call our people Africans? But in the Supreme Wisdom Lessons, it say, why does the devil call our people Africans? But I'm putting my twist on it. Answer. Just the answer it gives. To make our people of North America believe that the people on the continent are the only people they have and are all savages. He bought a trading post in the jungle of that continent. The original people live on this continent, and they are the ones who strayed away from the civilization and are living a jungle life. The original people call this continent Asia, but the Caucasians, aka devils, call it Africa to try to divide them. He wants us to think that we are all different.
Well, as you're aware, in 1912, Dr. Walter Plecker became the first director of the Bureau of Vital Statistics. Prior to that, there were no birth certificates, and he was a director up until the 1940s, 1946, until his death. But he was part of the eugenics movement, which was a movement about creating one race of people, which was white, and everything else was put in a pot, as Tina Marie would say, and stir it up and called colored. But he went beyond board on that, wherein, as far as first Americans are concerned, he changed birth certificates and marriage license. He even put out letters to census takers in 1930 that people such as myself, that are first Americans or Native Americans, that he considered us as being bastards, that we were just trying to be Indian to marry into the white race. What's so interesting about that was that in the 30s, he gave a presentation in New York City and on eugenics, and there were commanders associated with Adolf Hitler that attended that particular meeting.
But basically, when he was the registrar for the Bureau of Vital Records, he changed the names of Indian people in Southampton County, their race, from Indian to Negro or colored.
Well, it was referred to as colored. And basically all the tribes in Virginia in the early 1900s were referred to as colored, okay? Then after the 1924 Racial Integrity Act, everything that was in that colored bowl became Negro.
This is why they call us, some people Africans, they call some Jamaicans, Dominican. They the ones started this shit. They the ones started this labeling people after continents. We never did no shit like that. They did that, again, to make you think that you are all different, when in fact you're not. Your ass is not. The original man in Australia is no different from the original man in America. The original man in India is no different from the original man in South America. The original man that's in Africa is no different from the original man in Mexico. We all fall under the same umbrella. We are all original to the land.
And you're saying, I'm assuming, that history is being manipulated for an end
in itself. History, the Europeans began to manipulate history when they rose and began to expand into the broader world in the 15th and the 16th century, because they had to justify the slave trade and they had to justify the colonial system that followed. And modern racism has its incubation in that period. You cannot enslave a man and say he's a human being, that he has humanity, and that he was one of the forerunners of the world's religion. You cannot enslave an African and say this about him, because if you say he's a human being, then you're saying he's an extension of you. Then you cannot sell an African Christianity and call him a heathen and acknowledge the African contribution toward the creation of Christianity. So it's a contradiction in acknowledging that the man created Christianity, then come back and say that you are selling him Christianity because he is a heathen. So the European had to literally strip history of the contribution of non-European people.
Who were the Etruscans? Living in the area now described as northern Italy between 800 and 300 BC, they were a peaceful, highly advanced civilization who left behind a distinctive wealth of archaeological remains, including tombs, complex architecture, sophisticated waterworks, invention of pasta and religious sites, and many inventions that we attribute to the Romans today. In his 2013 book, Black Origins of Ancient Rome, the German author Gert Müller explains how the black descendants of Kemet, ancient Egypt, created the sophisticated Etruscan civilization. Archaeological and genetic evidence shows that the black Etruscans were eventually displaced by the invading Romans who inherited their technology and science. Described as dark-skinned Africans, the Etruscans venerated the African sun god Ra from Kemet, Egypt, and even had Egyptian-like tombs. The Etruscans were so advanced that even their sewage...
Into a country, plague the whole place out, and then take over their buildings. New York was already there for thousands of years. San Francisco was there for thousands of years. Los Angeles was there for thousands of years. They were built by the indigenous people who were black and Indians as well.
Whoa.
The black people They weren't brought over by slaves. They are the original owners of America.
Thank you.
Black people,
Wow.
African Americans. They don't come from Africa. They were already here, and they plagued them out. And they stole, the Smithsonian Institute stole their knowledge, stole their history, and now we're just left.
We can all thank the Twa Mbuti for our presence here. Had they not done what they did, we wouldn't be here today. They populated the world about 100,000 years ago. There is evidence of a woman found in San Diego, California. Her bones are about 80 to 90,000 years old. When you look at the California, named after Queen Khalifa, it was an African woman. So that when we're looking at these migrations, when we're looking at the people here, people came in waves. And the first wave is going to be the Twa Mbuti. The second wave is going to be what's called the Clovis Folsom people. Clovis Folsom are going to be found in Clovis Folsom, New Mexico. McJunker, African American, who was an archaeologist, anthropologist, found these bones.
They just don't show it. But they're, and remember this too. The Asiatic face, by the way, comes from the San people from South Africa. You saw the way Mandela looked like a black Chinese man?
Yes.
That's where all Asians come from. The San people, who are the oldest people on the planet, from South Africa. Those are those Bushmen, but they look like black Chinese.
Right.
That's where the Chinese look comes from.
With the click.
That's where the Chinese come from. Yeah. The San people in South Africa. That Asian look is black.
In 1543, Hernando de Soto and the Spanish Conquistador Army was met by a large nation of black Indians in North Louisiana near Monroe and the Ouachita River, as the Spanish was trying to colonize Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and the entire Gulf Coast. And that's just in North Louisiana that there was a whole bunch of black Indians. And that passage is found in the primitive black nations of America. And prior to Hernando de Soto coming to Louisiana to colonize the Gulf Coast, he had arrived in Florida, off the coast of Florida, and automatically started warring with the Florida Indians, who was giving them the whole time. And de Soto had described the Florida Indians that he was at war with as being very large black Indians in an aspect different from those from the interior of North America because of the climate that they lived in. Because of the humid sun that they lived in, the complexion was very dark-skinned and they had woolly hair. And that passage is found in the history of Hernando de Soto by Bernard Shipp.